All right, we are lucky to have this week, we have Lake City head coach Greg Berge. Coach has had a lot of success in Lake City in 2 different stints in Lake City, but you'll tell us all about that here in a minute. But Coach, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks for doing this. It's a great thing that you're providing for the basketball world in Minnesota.
Well, it's been as beneficial for me as I'm sure for anyone, because I get to, sit here and listen to all the great coaches we have in the state, share their knowledge, and I get a front and center view to it. So it's been really enjoyable for me and a lot of learning, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot from you as well. So I know you've listened to some before. So your coaching Wikipedia page, where are you from? Where have you been? And then how did you get to Lake City?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a unique background, pretty traditional to start. I grew up in the cities, Spring Lake Park, went to school at Winona State, was kind of a tweener college player. So I really didn't play in college, but I coached all through college. I coached youth traveling teams kind of all 4 years at Winona State. My first teaching job was in Lake City, high school math teacher. And my third year as a teacher, I got the head job, replacing a legend, Jerry Snyder, Hall of Fame, legend in Lake City. I replaced him, so I got that experience. For 7 years, I also, during that time, those 7 years, I went back and got my admin degree, not really with the intent of using it. There's a group of people that were doing it, and I thought it was a good opportunity. But after the 7 years was up, I had an opportunity in Goodhue to be the principal. And it was one of the few places where I wouldn't have to move my family and would take an admin job. And I had a really, really tough decision. I had a dream teaching job, a dream coaching job. I was our O coordinator on varsity football. I was head basketball. I did assistant golf. I was teaching AP Calc and geometry courses I just loved. And we were coming off of a 25-2 basketball season, undefeated in our conference, and I had to make a decision. And I kind of took a leap of faith. It was really hard to do because at that time I was 33, 34 years old. But I did it. And I went to Goodhue for 2 years, had a great 2 years. A principal job opened up in Lake City. I came back and I was back here for another 6 years, and the basketball job opened up again. And in that middle time, I had kids, I had a family. My son was kind of in that 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. It's our senior class that just graduated. So I had coached those kids. And I really got to see basketball from a different perspective. I got to see it from an administrative perspective. I got to see it from teaching a group of kids starting in 1st grade, 2nd grade, and coaching them and how to develop. And the juices were flowing to get back in. And I had a great superintendent that was very supportive at the time, Craig Junker, and I approached him about it. And, we talked and he supported me, and I applied for the position. And to be honest, that interview, because of my role as a principal, it was a very thorough interview. They had a lot of people involved. It's the most I've ever been intimidated in my life because I believe I wanted it so bad. Mm-hmm. But it went well. I got it. And I've been back doing both for the last 7 years. And we've had a good run, a great tradition in this community. And we've had a good run lately with some great kids coming through.
What are some positives and negatives of being an administrator while coaching in the same district?
There's way more positives. It's incredibly busy. That would probably be the negative, but I'm a very organized guy and I'm a very efficient person. And I have a saint for a wife, and my family has grown up with basketball. Both my kids play. My son, I got to coach my son during this time, which was great. My daughter plays basketball, so I do miss some of her games. But the positives, it is the connection and the relationships you make with kids that you coach is different than you would as an administrator. And it's like being a teacher. It's the same type of relationship. So, my ability to just kind of impact the culture of the school and culture of basketball at the same time is more powerful. If I have kids at a volleyball game that are messing around, I just got to make a look, and I'm not just their principal, I'm their basketball coach. And so there's a different type of relationship that really allows you to impact the culture of the school. That's probably the biggest positive. our assistant principal is a head baseball coach. Our AD is a head wrestling coach. So a lot of our administrators are coaches, and it's been a real positive experience in our school.
Awesome. So you coached, like you said, for what, 7 years, and then you were off, and then you've been back for 8 years. 8 years. You're gone for 8 years, and now you've been back. So how when you came back, did you feel like the game has changed in your second stint versus your first stint?
Well, that's interesting. So my first stint, we had good teams. We won the conference a couple times. I always felt like and I still am, a defense first type of guy. And that was my emphasis. I always feel that's the one thing you can control on a given night. I never really felt real comfortable with what we did offensively that first go around. I wasn't all in on it. And then when I got out for the 8 years, I really, you step away, and still being young, you get a different perspective from a youth program too, on how to develop kids. And, looking for an offense for second graders and how to teach the game of basketball is not always easy. And, I actually asked a colleague of mine who had young kids at the time, and he pointed me to the read and react 5-out. And I looked at it and I really liked it because it taught kids how to play the game. It taught spacing. And so we implemented that with that group starting in second grade. And when I got the head job back, I went from a continuity-based type of offensive coach the first time to a pure motion 5-out, concept now. And it's changed the way I think about the game. It's changed the way that we approach the game. And I'm also a very analytic coach. So that kind of feeds into it as well.
So you talk about the great tradition that Lake City has for basketball. How have you, if it was maybe your first time, maybe even as principal in the middle, or your second time as head coach, how have you helped establish and grow that basketball culture within the community?
Jerry Snyder, he was a legend, and how Lake City won for many, many years was defense, shot selection, and smart team play. And I would say that has not changed with how we play right now. We are a defense first mentality team. I think we have a toughness with our kids, very team oriented and very role driven with shot selection. And so those things haven't changed. How we play the game has changed, but those haven't. It really starts with our youth. It really starts with our off season. And, we have my mantra is no deposit, no return. It has been for 20 some years. And that is what my kids hear all the time in the off season. We have a 300-hour club that really builds on that culture in the off season, and kids kind of buy in. And I'm kind of a big driveway guy. We do some stuff obviously in the summer, but at the same time, I want kids to get in the driveway and get better individually. That is their opportunity, as I say, to change your role on our team so that when we get there by winter, we can focus on the team more than anything. The off season is your opportunity to try to change your role, and the in season is to make our team the best team it can be.
So you talk about your 300-hour club. I know this is something that you presented on last fall at the MBCA clinic. Now, for any coaches who are listening who maybe dipped out, went to the bar a little early, can you go into some details on what that 300-hour club looks like, and what some of the just the details with that and what that is?
Yeah, basically we give the kids a calendar from April 1 to October 31st, and we want them to write down all basketball related activities on that calendar. In addition, they set goals for themselves, goals for the off season that they have to fill out a form with. Anything with the weight room, any basketball related activities. We also give credit for playing fall and spring sports. We want kids to be multi-sport athletes. So they get, X number of hours if they play a fall or spring sport. They get hours for doing service work in the community, up to 20 hours. They get hours for making the honor roll. They get, for doing certain workouts or making so many free throws, they get a bonus hour. And basically kids write down their hours over the course of the off season. And if they reach 300, we reward them at the start of the season with a t-shirt in front of, all of our fans and student body the first game of the season. We do the same thing with our youth, except we do a 150-hour club. And what I love about it is kids, they have to be committed. They have to be disciplined because they have to keep writing their hours down. And so it really focuses kids to do some of the skills that kind of match the culture of our program too, which is to, discipline and, a lot of those things. So, we've had, if I looked at our last 5-6 years, our kids who have been our key players, our top 5-6 guys every year, have almost all hit the 300-hour club each year. So I think that has helped create the culture for the younger kids in our program to see and match.
How did you roll that out, and what was the reception when you installed the 300-hour club?
I first did it my first go around coaching, so it's probably been 20 some years ago. I just presented it, and it went well the first 7 years, but I would say it has thrived the last 5 years, and it's thrived because our leaders, our top players in our program, have bought into it. And when the younger kids see the Nate Heises, the Brady Kahinkas, the Mark Choses, the Reed Gassners, all completing the 300-hour club, it just feeds itself. And that's how you build a culture. You have expectations, things that are important to you, you share them, and then you just, you got to kind of keep that ball rolling and hope that some of that success feeds off on younger people.
What I like about that is it doesn't put every, a one size fits all approach to kids where you're saying you need to lift. Our team this year, we won our section. Unfortunately, didn't get to play in the state tournament. Our senior group, bless their hearts, amazing kids in the classroom, hardworking, probably the smartest team of what we could do with scouting reports and film breakdown stuff. They were allergic to the weight room, right? But telling them that they need to lift weights for $100 in the summer, they would have looked at me and like I was crazy, right? But just allowing them, whatever that 300 hours looks like to them, I think is it really, it's like in education, like in teaching, it's an individualized plan for each kid, and it's teaching to that kid's or coaching or teaching to that kid's strengths. I really like that it's not forcing every kid that you need to go make 10,000 shots or you need to lift 100, 25 days. I just really like that it's not a one size fits all approach.
Yeah. And, with that, every kid has a different role on your team, and not every kid is going to be a shooter. Not every kid is going to be a scorer. We've had kids in our team that, they don't score a lot of points, but they're a defender, rebounder, screener. And, the weight room matters to them probably as much as anything. And that's going to make our team better too. So you're right. I think it does give a more individualized approach.
Small town like Lake City, you mentioned before we recorded that you guys graduated about 100. We're about 225, 230. It's about twice the size. So with your guys is within that 300-hour club, you talked about community service. So what are some examples that kids in your program will do to give back to the community?
Well, the most obvious one is we have our summer camps. And so a lot of times our older kids are, my wife cooks lunch every day for our kids that help out at summer camps. So we end up, and I don't really turn too many kids away for that. I'll have 15, 20 upperclassmen, helping out with the younger kids at camp, which sometimes they're harder to manage than the kids at the camp are. But, we feed them, and that's a culture thing too, because, I really feel like I have a lot of control over our youth program. I handpick our coaches from a young age. I get to know the kids from second, third grade on really, really well. They connect with our older kids because our older kids are constantly at camps. And so, that relationship is built from a very, very young age. And you can kind of mold kids and mold culture when you see them a lot. That's a benefit of being a 712 school too. And maybe in my role as a principal, I'm in the lunchroom almost every day. And I am connecting with a lot of kids, not just our basketball kids, but you can mold kids and expectations for them on a daily basis when you know them and when you see them.
You mentioned your youth program. Talk about you mentioned you were able to pick all of your coaches. What does your youth program look like? You said you're kind of have a lot of power with that. I know Dave Cressup, similar type community with Perham, a thriving 2A basketball program, basketball community. So what are some ways talk about your involvement in the youth program, and if that's in the off season and then also during the season?
Yeah. We've had some phenomenal youth coaches that get it, coaches who have played, who have had success, that understand the importance of fundamentals. And when we've had that, those kids get to our varsity level and have really, really good success. And so it's really important for me to pick those people and find those people, and being in the community as long as I have, I'm pretty well connected, and I kind of know kids coming up, and I know parents, and I reach out to them at a young age. Getting them running our 5-out motion from a young age is really important. One thing I learned from running motion 5-out offense is every time a kid passes and cuts, they're getting better. Every time they learn spacing, they're getting better. And sometimes in back in the day when you did a more of a continuity based offense, you're teaching kids to be robots, in my opinion, and kind of run to spots. And what I really feel that we've done is we've just taught them how to play and give them the freedom to play. And that's really been the biggest difference in the development of kids, in my opinion. We play probably 7-8 tournaments a year. We practice 2 to 3 times a week at the elementary level. We've set it up so we have traveling, but we also have an elementary option within that. So if we have a 4th, 5th, 6th grader, or a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grader that wants to play basketball but doesn't want to commit like a traveling kid does, they just come to practice on Mondays, and they might only play in 1 or 2 of our Southeast League tournaments. So they're still connected with the team. They still get to participate, but they don't have to go all in like your traveling kids would. And so that creates opportunities for kids, which I think is important at a young age as well. That's really what our off-season program looks like. I don't do a ton of stuff in the fall and spring with kids. They're so busy with other sports and other activities that, I respect that. And I think I have to a little bit in my role too. And then in the summer, we have the camps. We have 2 camps, 2 weeks for the basically 3rd through 10th grade. And, the 300-hour club, again, it encourages a lot of individual work in the driveway. And a lot of our kids are doing that. They're playing AAU and, they're getting plenty of basketball.
I said this with Josh Ortman last week about 5-out at the youth level. And I think it is a huge disservice if a youth program or team isn't running 5-out. I just think like you said, you're building kids to be robots. I see a lot of youth teams, they'll just go to flex, or they think they're modern. They'll go to the ball screen continuity, which I think ball screen continuity is a nice offense at the high school level. But now you're really only teaching, unless you're truly inverting that and you're having everyone play different spots. That's one thing. But if you start, even 4-out motion, if that one kid who's your 5'10" 5th grader, or whatever, maybe that's too big, but you get the idea, then stops growing, that kid has no chance to make it at the varsity level. And so I just think by running 5-out at the youth level, you're just allowing everyone to develop at their own pace, and you're not pigeonholing anyone as a post or a guard, because maybe the kid who can dribble all of a sudden becomes 6'7". Now you can be creative with them when they're at high school, and you can run some, inverted offense type stuff with them. But I do want to get into your 5-out. So you've been running 5-out pretty much 2nd grade on all the way up. Like you said, you had this group that you've coached for, seems like 10, 11 years, and you've been running 5-out with them. So what are some of your main teaching points? Are you more pass and cut? Are you more pass and screen away? And what are some of your main actions or the looks that you're trying to get out of that offense?
It's the one thing I love about what we do in our 5-out is there's no guarantee each year what we're going to do. You can really build it around the talent that you have. Our last 2 years, we ran less 5-out because the personnel we had, and we ran more 4-out 1 in, and I did a lot more kind of 2-man game stuff than I ever have. But that's because I had Nate Heisey, Reed Gassner, just phenomenal, talented kids, and I knew that every time that Nate gave up the ball, every team we were going to play is going to do everything in their power to not let him get it back. And so, when you have someone like that, I had to adapt a little bit and, keep the ball in his hands as much as we could. But this next year, we're going back to 5-out. I got a really probably a pretty young team, and there's some athletes, and it's going to be a totally different style of play than what we've done the last year or two. But yeah, a lot of pass cut. We've mixed in ball screens quite a bit. I do quite a bit of ball screen action out of our 5-out or 4-out. And then what I think is really important is you have to look at the strengths of your individual players, and you got to put them in a position to do what they do best. We tell the kids over and over again, be great at what you're good at. And so whether you're a dribble handoff kid, or you're a screen kid, or you're a shooter, or you're a creator, or you can post up, or whatever it may be, I will touch base with kids and put them in positions to do things in our 5-out that are going to make them be successful and us. And I think that's the fun part of coaching, is it's almost like a chess game where you're looking at, here's my talent, here's my kids, what do they do well, what can I have them do well within the 5-out, and then how can we build that as our season progresses. And that's really kind of the approach I take, combined with, the biggies for us are turnovers and shot selection. And if you look at why we have won over the years, those are the two things that stick out more than anything in terms of stats. And so that's something that we talk a lot about with our kids.
I do want to come back to that turnovers and shot selection, how you discussed that, but I want to stay in the 5-out umbrella for now. Going backwards here. So change of possession, live ball. If it's let's say you're getting a defensive rebound, do you have, or a made basket, do you have set lanes in transition, or because it's 5-out, you just are kind of guys are filling spots and you're looking to attack in transition?
This group I had the last 2 years has never ran the floor real well, especially.
All right, so a little technical difficulties on my end. So I didn't hear Coach for a second. So Coach, transition, what are you looking to, where are you guys looking to run, where are their spots, and how interchangeable is that?
Yeah, I was saying our group these last 2 years has not been a great transition team they never have, even growing up. We would run off, steals and so forth, but we didn't run a ton off of defensive boards. Whereas prior to that, a couple years before, we have a shell where we want kids to go, but it's pretty open. I'm not real concrete in that. I want us to push the ball up the court, try to get into early offense, and then right into flow into our 5-out. Next year we'll be running a whole lot more. But yeah, we space the floor. We get guys to the corners. We usually have, a post type player that's running the rim, and we'll probably drag screen behind, with a trailer. And I try to keep it real simple. But like I said, these last couple of years, we haven't been a great running team.
Team switching against you, you're running your 5-out, or even if it's, even when you're running your 2-man game stuff, what's your philosophy against switching?
Yeah. We have Caledonia is a team that switches all the time. They're, top team in our section. So we have to be prepared for that. That's one reason I love the 5-out is, if you set a lot of screens and you're running a continuity offense, a team like Caledonia is really going to hurt you because they're switching all the time. They're used to it. And most teams you play against don't do that. So your kids aren't used to it. When you run a 5-out and there's a lot of passing and cutting, there's a lot of things you can do. We do screen in our 5-out. We give kids options to screen away, but what we end up doing a lot is we slip a lot. We'll slip ball screens. We'll slip screens away. We will roll back, on a screen. But I think, you can take away a team's aggressiveness if you start hitting a few back cuts, if you slip some screens and you stay spread out. And for teams that are trying to switch all the time, they're generally trying to play very aggressive. And that's a benefit of the 5-out is we've been great and we drill it all the time, just back cuts. We do a lot of 2-man passing in practice. We do a lot of passing and cutting. And against teams that switch, we'll do a lot of slips and then some certain sets that we run as well.
What about a team that's really aggressive off on the line, up the line, denying those entry passes? What do you guys look to do then?
We kind of use the 3-point arc as our read line with traditional read and react, and we back cut off of that. And those teams that are really aggressive, you have to burn them on back cuts. That's how you have to slow them down. We'll have certain sets that, we'll run also that, will get us an easy bucket. But spacing the floor is really, really important. We talk about spacing religiously. Teams that are that aggressive are going to create driving lanes for you. If they're more worried about getting their hand in the passing lane, they're going to create space, for someone to get to the rim. And so, we take advantage of those situations if we can with our guys that are able to do that.
You talked about turnovers and shot selection. So I want to get into that. Those are your two big things, or your non-negotiables, or maybe the turnovers are non-negotiable. Shot selection is something that's a huge core of your offense. So how do you have those conversations with kids and explaining like what a good turnover is? Because they're inevitable. We're going to have some turnovers. And then shot selection, and especially with those role guys who aren't Nathan Heisey going to Northern Iowa, but a guy who is maybe your fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh guy. So how do you talk shot selection? And then how do you discuss what is a turnover you're okay with versus one that's completely unacceptable?
Yeah, I think so much with turnovers and shot selection comes down to defining rules for your kids. If kids are trying to do things they're not good at, they're going to get themselves in trouble. They're going to get the team in trouble. And so first and foremost, clearly defining exactly what kids are good at and encouraging them to do that is really, really important. You know, we track two stats a lot: effective field goal percent, turnover rate, and then we also, points per possession as well. And effective field goal rate is really shot selection to me. I mean, obviously, we're not always going to have the best shooting teams in the world, and our approach to how we're going to score might change from year to year, but shot selection should never change. I've got some pretty amazing stats, and I share these stats with our kids, and they understand the importance of shot selection or turnover rate. We've had a lot of success the last 6 years. We've had some really, really strong players and really good teams, but we are 133-6 when we have a higher effective field goal percentage than our opponent. And so sharing that with kids, they get it. The data shows them how important that is. And so when we talk about roles and shot selection, they get it. And then we're 14-21 when we have a lower effective field goal percent. So from a success rate and win-loss rate, that's a big stat. And then turnover rate, our goal is to be under 20% of our possessions each game. My first go-around coaching, we would just have a goal of fewer than 10 turnovers a game. What I like about turnover rate is every game has different possession numbers. Some teams, we've played faster, some slower, and the rate of possessions matters more. So we want to keep it under 20%. And, this past year we were at 12%, which is unheard of from a turnover rate. But we've been at about 16.1% over the last 6 years. And, so throwing data at kids, I mean, I'm a math guy, so I got a little math nerd in me. But they see that and they see the success, and it just helps create the culture.
Points per possession, what's your magic number with that?
1.0, and then we want to keep our opponents under 0.85. We've been 1.14 points per possession the last 6 years. And you talk about also analytics, because you go 5 out, and I don't know if you've seen the same thing with shot selection. I don't ever tell our kids, I've never really told them we do not take mid-range jumpers. But very few of our shots are mid-range jumpers, because 5 out and our sets and what we do kind of put you in that mode. And then you throw analytics and data at kids and they see that as well. But we want to work inside out. We realize that you can get inside a lot of different ways. But we have shot in the last 6 years 1,546 more 3-pointers than our opponents. And we have made 726 more threes than our opponents. We've had some phenomenal shooters. So I'm not saying that that's going to be our approach every single year. But the 3-point shot has really changed the game, and it creates space for a guy like Nate this year, Nate Heisey. Teams switched their whole way of guarding us this year. They basically said, we can't let Jake Wohlers, Reed Gassner, and some of these guys kill us with threes. We can't leave them, and we got to just take our chances a little bit more with Nate than we would have in previous years. Well, Nate scored 30 a game this year because of that reason. It's kind of that you take what the defense gives you a little bit.
That's that's crazy, because everyone's watching The Last Dance, right? You see on Twitter, everyone's tweeting about it, and the one thing that's so like mind-boggling to me is like you watch a guy like Steve Kerr, or in a bigger sense like John Stockton, who are like 45, 48% career 3-point shooters. Like if those dudes have been playing now, like Steve Kerr have been playing, have a lot bigger role in today's NBA. Obviously he's installing that with his guys on the Warriors. But like a guy like John Stockton, he would only be even higher up on wherever he is. I haven't went that far down. I have my top 5 or so, but if he's 28th or 30th or wherever he is on the top, 50 players of all time, his numbers would be even higher if he was playing in today's game, just with the analytics we have. And it's looking at it from a backwards lens. It's so like obvious, like why aren't people shooting more threes? But that just wasn't the culture of it. And, I think I joked about something on Twitter, the Michael Jordan Trailblazers game in like 92 in the championship when he had the shrug the shoulders game. It's like he made 5 threes in the first half. Like, shouldn't that have been like, maybe Michael should just shoot more threes? Like they're worth more points. But, it's funny to see now the high school games coming along. Like you mentioned, you're ahead of the curve with how much you've shot. It helps that you have good shooters. So what are some ways that you instill that confidence or create shooters? I know it's probably not all form shooting, right? It's a lot of them. It's a mentality. So what are some ways that you instill confidence in your guys?
It starts with form. I really believe if you don't have good form by the time you get to the varsity level where the game is so much faster, good luck turning into a shooter. I think it's just really, really hard. So we obviously drill that at a young age and get on the chair and do a lot of one-hand shooting, things like that. And then it's repetition and confidence. But I also think, shot selection is a big deal. If you're taking good shots, most high school kids that are going to shoot a catch and shoot rhythm 3 have a good chance of making it. So making sure that you wait for the best shot and taking a good shot is a big part of shooting percentage and building confidence. Because if you're not making shots, you're not going to be confident, and it kind of turns into a domino effect. We've had 2 kids that have been career 45% plus 3-point shooters that are in the national record books because of that. One of them is a senior this year, Jake Wohlers. That was his role, and he was a sniper in terms of a shooter, and he was a perfect fit for Nate and Reed, because if you sagged off him at all, he was going to make you pay. Mark Chose played a point guard for us. He's playing at Jamestown right now. He had to create a lot more of those threes on his own, and he had range forever. But with that being said, Nate, who didn't shoot quite as high a percentage, maybe a better shooter, arguably. I'm sure that I'm going to get in an argument with those 3 now. But Nate's shot selection had to be different the last couple of years, and he forced some shots, which I was okay doing.
How do you drill shooting in practice?
We shoot a lot. We have some competitive drills that we do, and I think competitive drills are huge. Our kids shoot a lot on their own too. Whether they can get in on the weekend or on their driveway or whatever it may be. But, we spend 20, 30 minutes a day shooting, and, a lot of repetition. We don't practice a long time, but a good chunk of our practice is shooting. And like I said, it's form, it's confidence, and then it's shot selection and just putting them in a position to be successful.
I want to come back to the analytics here because just something came to me as you were talking. You mentioned the turnover percentage, the effective field goal percentage, and the points per possession. Are you tracking that in the game? And if you are, how are you using that to like at halftime to make changes? Or if not, what are some things you are looking to track during the game?
During the game, I don't get that technical. I kind of go more of the feel during the game, and I look at it. I reflect on the game after and watching film and all of that. We're obviously looking at turnovers and what type of shots we're getting, and really defensively during the game. I'm thinking defensively as much as anything during the game. But yeah, I use it more as I don't want to be over analytical for our kids either. I just want them to play and play freely. So most of that is done, during practice.
So you mentioned Nate Heisey, obviously averaged 30 points a game, Mr. Basketball finalist, Division I kid. Your team isn't Minnehaha Academy. You're not Hopkins. You're not a team that has, maybe multiple Division I athletes or 5, 6, 7 scholarship level kids on your team at a given time. And so how do you with you're a good team. So no knocking your other guys. I know they want other kids going to Division II school. And so you obviously had a really talented team, but you have a kid like that that's a Division I caliber kid, UNI, good school, all right? And so how do you challenge him daily in practice to make practice valuable and also help the team, but also challenging him as an individual?
Yeah, it's not easy. What made it even more challenging this year is, these kids are the same age as my son. I've known most of these kids since, they came out of the womb, a lot of them, in a small town. And so with a lot of these kids, I'm not just a coach to them. I'm Greg. They've known me since they've been little. And I've had hundreds upon hundreds of practices with them because I coached them in, second, third, fourth grade until I got the varsity job again. So, it made it a little bit unique and challenging this year because they knew me too well. I knew them too well. We really made, and Nate is a guy that he thrives off competition. And that is why I guarantee you, he's going to go to UNI and he is going to thrive, because when he's with guys that are going to challenge him on a daily basis, he's just wired that way. He has an edge to him. And he has been working his tail off since the season ended to get ready for UNI. But it's hard. It's hard in a small school where we don't have a lot of guys that could challenge Nate. Reed obviously could, Justin Wohler is another kid on our team, and, but it's hard to put kids in a position to do that. We had pretty short practices this year because these kids knew me, I knew them. There wasn't a lot new, and I didn't want to bore them. And so it was short and sweet a lot. We would do a lot of small side games. If I need to challenge kids, do 2-on-2, 3-on-3, and I'd have Nate and Reed working against each other, which can be good and bad because they challenge each other. They're both competitive, and that brings out the competitive juices. So it's hard in a small school, but you got to be creative and find different ways to still make it competitive.
You talked about short practices. How short are we talking, and how does December look different than February?
We'll go probably 2 hours to start the year in December. Once I hit January, we're probably about an hour and a half. And I'd say the last month of the year, we're an hour to an hour and 15. And we might go for 45 minutes and then go watch film for 20, 30 minutes. We watch a lot more film as we get to the end of the season and we start seeing a team for the second time or getting ready for the tournament. We're going to watch a lot more film at that time. But I'm a big believer in trying to keep kids fresh, by the end of the season. And we do not lift. I know this is a little bit contradictory to what a lot of people do. I encourage kids to lift individually. A lot of them go to Anytime Fitness on their own and they're lifting all season long, but we do not take practice time to lift as a team. It's hard. It was hard for me to find a way to do it consistently. And I'm just so conscious of keeping them fresh. And, having 2, 3, 3.5 hour practices with everything else going on, I think that just hurts your kids by the time you get to the end of the season. At least, maybe in a smaller school, it's different, but that's how I feel here.
We've lifted one time in the last 2 years. And I agree with you. I think it's tough because if a kid hasn't lifted all year, I mean, there's the old school, like get in there, get sore, and you should have been more prepared. But you kind of got to meet kids where they're at. If this kid doesn't want to lift, probably lifting in November and December is going to hurt his performance on the court. It's going to burn him out because those are muscles that haven't been fired up. And I know there's coaches who lifting is an important part of their program, and that's great. I just think it's as long as you're doing what you believe in. I'm in the same boat with you. I'd rather go 90 minutes on the court hard up and down when they're exhausted and then be done. Because like you said, kids are kids. They got AP classes, maybe some have jobs. It's just like there's a lot of stuff going on. And, keeping a kid at a gym in February for 3 hours, I think you get a return on investment. Last question here. Advice for a first-year head coach. Now, you've coached obviously now for 15 years, 2 different stints. What is something, if I'm a new coach is listening to this, what's some advice that you would give them?
First and foremost, and I think the longer you're in it, you realize that this is about relationships with kids more than anything. I think I knew that as my first go around coaching, but you don't really feel it until maybe you start having your own kids or you're around longer and you go through things and you really understand this is about memories, experiences, and relationships. In the end, they're not going to remember every single game they played in, but they're going to remember the experiences and memories that they have along the way. So just always remember that. And then 2, I think just in working with parents and the community, um, things like passion and organization and them knowing that you love their kid and are working your tail off to help the team and their kid go a long way. And I think, when coaches may run into some challenges with parents or whatnot, you got to fall back on the relationship, the kid, and clear expectations and communication that you've had from the get-go. They may not always agree with what you're doing, but if you're very clear and upfront with the kid and the parent as to what you're doing and why, it is what it is. And you have to agree to disagree at times. I've had very few, very, very few in all my 14 years of parent issues. And I think it's because they know how much time I put in. They know how much I care about the kids. And I try to be incredibly organized and efficient with parents so they know exactly what the expectations are.
So, Coach, I appreciate you coming on. I just want to say, I've seen your teams play twice. Once was we played before 2 seasons ago. We weren't coaching at the this Pacesetter Sweet 16, but also, your team was at the state tournament 2 years ago. We both played in our respective third place games, and you guys played before us. And that year when, especially for us, we hadn't been to the state tournament in 87 years, and it was like, we have to go to state, we have to go to state. I don't think I sat back and just watched a basketball game all year. Even like the Timberwolves, like everything I was doing, I was so invested in whatever we need to do to make sure we get to the state tournament. But that third place game, so we're playing Austin. We just came off getting hammered by De La Salle 2 days before, had a nice loose practice, came back to St. Paul, and we just sat and watched your guys' game versus Perham. And honestly, it was so relieving. It was such a fun basketball game. And a lot of people, I think, just kind of look past those consolation games and stuff. But, man, watching you and Cressup and your teams go at it, two really well-coached rural communities that play the game the right way, it was a ton of fun. And I honestly think it was the only game I sat back and just watched, that whole season. And I just want to say I love how your team plays. Obviously, you're going to have a little talent drop-off from the high-end guys that you've had this year, but I guarantee you'll be right back in there competing with Caledonia here for a section title next season. So, Coach, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Appreciate it, and thanks for doing this. It's a phenomenal thing for our Lakes, or not just Lake City, but our entire Minnesota basketball community. Thank you.
Thank you.